Hi everyone. It's been so good to hear about you how you're thinking about your projects this evening. So my name is Maru Attwood, and I'm an undergraduate fellow and a history concentrator. So my project explores the history of fences and paths as points of environmental interaction in rural South Africa. I look at the ways that environmental agents such as cattle, colonial officials, antelope, African herders, white farmers, lions, and diseases all interacted around these points. I focus in on a region in the northeast of the country known as Nsikazi, and about which little academic history is written. So Nsikazi was this thin fragment of land that during colonialism was segregated as an area where Black people could live, though they could not own land. And it lies between the Kruger National Park, this massive world-famous conservation area on one side, and on the other, it's bordered by this expanse of large privately owned farms and towns, which during apartheid were owned exclusively by white people, and is also the area where I, as a white South African, grew up. So to research this history, I brought material that I found in a number of archives in South Africa, together with oral histories that I collected over 3 months working with people in and around Nsikazi. And in this developing reciprocity with oral history narrators that I worked with by sharing historical material like archival records and historical aerial images that I've gained access to through my research has been a really important part of this project. I'm researching this topic out of a deep curiosity about and responsibility that I feel towards the land that I grew up on and am connected to through histories of colonialism. I'm also working out of a recognition of the ways that engagement with local histories really matter. And to this end, I'm creating an illustrated account of some of the narratives that I found in this history with the goal to continue to engage people in and around the Nsikazi area about the ways that about their histories and the ways that they're represented. So through this project, I'm tracing the history of relationships with the environment from before the late 19th century, when there were scattered settlements and relatively loose social and physical boundaries, a point in time in which there was no need for tight spatial and territorial divisions. And I trace this history through colonial land dispossession and the earliest introductions of barbed wire until the late 1960s at the height of apartheid-era segregation and environmental exclusion. And so this project really culminates in the period in which fencing becomes systematic within and on the borders of Nsikazi. And I'm looking at how fences and paths become sites of environmental interaction and contestation that various actors respond to in often surprising ways. So barbed wire, for instance, as one might expect, became a tool for the state to restrict Black people's access to land, water, animals, and other aspects of the environment. But the residents of Nsikazi also used barbed wire to extend the land that they had access to. They cut up fences and that white farmers erected over their footpaths, and sometimes they bundled those up to erect around their own fields and homes. When the Kruger National Park was fenced, many people and animals found ways around, through, and over the fence to continue accessing resources and the environment on the other side. Some, like lions, learned to hunt antelope by trapping them against the fence, and others, like elephants, simply smashed fences down to eat crops grown by people on the other side. But in my oral history testimonies, I found that the presence or absence of fences was not necessarily a case of clear-cut human-wildlife conflict. In some instances, people in Nsikazi intentionally avoided putting up fences around their fields and invited animals like reedbuck in to eat part of their crops with the understanding that this would make their harvests more abundant. So my project is concerned with localized mobility, the ways in which people and animals collectively created footpaths through the veldt, and the ways that this mobility concerned and threatened the colonial state. I argue that historical footpaths and boundaries are representations of complex and illegible local realities and relationships to space, ones that the settler colonial state sought to render legible and control. So the histories that I'm exploring have strong reverberations and continuities into the present, where many of the spatial, environmental, and economic inequalities of apartheid persist, and where over my lifetime in post-apartheid South Africa, fences and boundary walls have grown more restrictive, more ubiquitous, and more militarized.